So today we're going to be talking about the exploration round. It won a poll among my subscribers of what I should talk about next, so here I am making it. Now, in order to talk about this topic, I need to first discuss what exploration mode is and some common terms around it. So, with that, let's get started. So first, what is it that I'm talking about? Well, wherever you are, out of combat, and not in downtime, you are in exploration mode. And that doesn't really mean anything. So what's the difference between that and downtime? Because downtime is when you're out of combat, and that seems like a kind of fuzzy line. Well, time scale. Combat is in the scale of seconds, downtime is in the scale of days, and exploration, scale of minutes. So in the exploration mode, you then have exploration activities that take something in the scale of minutes. And these are the actions of exploration mode. In the same way how in combat you have 3 actions per turn, you kind of have 1 action per exploration round, in a sense. It's just what your character does. And you should look at these as an expression mechanically of what your character is doing. So, some are not really usable in dungeons primarily, and I'm going to be glossing over those because they're better talked about in other videos and other subsystems. And that's things like coerce, make an impression, or like all the charisma abilities. I'm going to shove that off to the side for if I make a video about how to run social encounters. And others that are more usable in dungeons are things like search, avoid notice, treat wounds, refocus, repair, things of that nature. Things that you see pretty often in a usual adventuring day environment. And then there's the thing called the exploration round. This is simply a 10-minute time increment. It's for all your things like treat wounds, refocus. They all take exactly 10 minutes. And you think 10 minutes in dungeon as a round in the same way a 6-second combat round is a round. And for GMs, if you want to make your dungeons feel a little bit more alive, roll 2d6, and after 2d6, put a wandering monster in the dungeon. Just whatever you roll on the die. So there, I just rolled 8 total. So after 8 exploration rounds, a new monster will be wandering around the dungeon. And because all the treat wounds, all the refocus stuff, that takes time, you then have pressure on their time. And that then rewards things like all the skill feats that make treat wounds better, all the feats that make refocus better, all that type of stuff. So, with that out of the way, we can now get into discussing the exact activities. And I'm going to show you how to access all of the activities possible. And to do that, you click these little 3 lines here that in Rules on Archives and Ethos, and you go into Action/Activities. You're going to be going to the Activities tab, and you're going to be clicking on Exploration Mode. And here are all of the possible exploration activities. There are a lot of them. So, I'm just going to cover over the ones that are commonly used in dungeon, and in order to do that, I'm going to split them into 2 categories. Now, the first category are things I'm going to be dubbing non-movement activities. They don't let you move while doing them. They usually have a designated time that they take in order to do. Some may require a roll and have other effects. Affix Talisman is one of them. You can see it takes 10 minutes to affix Talisman to an item, and they can be removed and refixed however you want. And a lot of those stand-still activities are things like Affix Talisman, where there is some kind of effect that you want, but it requires you to stand still in order to do the thing. So other examples could be identifying items, such as alchemy, identifying magical effects, learning a spell from a scroll or something that you could find in dungeon, refocusing and repairing something, and of course, treating wounds. So, now, all these have a few things in common. Notably, Fix Talisman, 10 minutes. Identify Alchemy, 10 minutes. Identify Magic, 10 minutes. Learn a spell. Well, this depends on the level of the spell, and it's hours per level of the spell. However, there are skill feats to make that lower, blah, blah. So, 60 minutes, 6 exploration rounds. Per spell level. In the Learn a Spell. Per spell level. Then you have Refocus Repair. Oh look, 10 minutes and 10 minutes. And Treat Wounds, 10 minutes, with a cooldown of 1 hour. As in, 6 exploration rounds. So you can see, everything is designed so it can be cut up on these 10-minute intervals in terms of these non-moving ones. The moving ones are more for you to be doing indefinitely while you are traveling. So, now let's go over a few of those. Let me just quickly note a few things about these movement activities. They are an indefinite duration, unlike the ones where you're stationary. These are things that you will be doing until combat starts. These are the things that your characters are just doing as they're wandering around. There is no limit on how long you are doing them. They represent exactly what you are doing when traveling. They're usually some smaller benefit, and a lot of them are only mattering when you do jump into combat. And we'll go over those in a minute. They're a way to prevent characters from saying, but I was actually searching around, raising my shield, and sneaking around, because you pick one possible exploration activity when you're moving around. And because you're only picking one, it then prevents characters from claiming they're doing a lot of things, and then just picking whatever stuff they want for initiative, that kind of thing. It is a way for you to clean all that up. So, let's go into what benefits these actually bring. Avoid notice. You want to sneak around? Avoid notice, because you're going to be sneaking around right before combat, lets you roll stealth for initiative. Cover tracks. If you're in a situation where you're getting tracked, well, there you go. Defend. You raise your shield consistently. Detect magic. You detect magic consistently. And I would note that detect magicking consistently is actually very important to make sure you're not leaving magic items behind, particularly in the pre-written adventures that rely on hidden magic items for players that look around. Detect magic will ping all of those. Now, follow the expert, which is very good if you're all like climbing something. You can all follow the expert. Very important activity to be aware of for that kind of situation. There's hustle, which I've never seen come up once, but if you're doing a lot of overland travel, hustle can be very important. Investigate. You get a recall knowledge. Easy enough. Repeating a spell. Well, if you didn't like raising shield repeatedly, why don't you raise the shield cantrip repeatedly? That's normally how I see this used. It says that this is likely only done when you're doing something truly novel. And I would argue that, like, entering a new room is like you could say, I'm repeating the spell shield. Fair enough. Scout. Scout gives the entire group a +1 circumstance bonus to initiative rolls. The entire group. That is interesting. And that means that if your character doesn't have a good exploration activity by default, you can say, okay, they're the group scout. And they're just going to be letting you use scout. Let the characters with the high perception actually use search. Because search is what actually finds the hidden enemies and concealed hazards. So, as such, funnily enough, you kind of want your worst perception character to be doing the exploration activity of scout, because it doesn't rely on perception, while the other ones kind of rely on a skill. How the rules are just shake out. Tracking, again, don't really need to go over this. Self-explanatory of why you'd want to use this. And that's it for the ones that I dubbed the movement activities. And now, I did mention rolling initiative and how that works, so let's talk about transitioning out of exploration mode. And for this, I'm going to go back to my normal, just only webcam, and I'm just going to note a few important things. So, when you're rolling initiative, your stat that you're rolling from is based on what you're doing immediately before initiative is rolled. So, that means if your barbarian is normally scouting, but they decide to slam open a door, well, their exploration activity became slam open the door, and they get to use athletics. Because that is what they were doing immediately before combat. It also means that they likely were not doing the investigate or anything else because they were slamming open the door. That was what they were doing immediately as combat started, and that's what a lot of the exploration activities are marking. And there's also a rule that says that, and I'm going to put this below me, you do not gain your reaction on the first turn if you're not aware of the enemy. And different GMs will rule this in different ways. A way that I've seen it get ruled by Ronald, the way that I like to rule it, is if you're obviously doing something that puts you on guard to danger, like repeatedly casting the shield cantrip, raising a shield, scouting, something along those lines, as long as you are not completely and utterly ambushed by stealth enemies, you're usually aware of them before your first turn, you get your reaction. However, if you're not actively scouting or doing those activities, for example, if you're investigating, you're likely to be a bit more off guard on that first round. That's how I like to rule it, and I feel like that's fair. And then that also gives a benefit for several characters wanting to search or scout, because that then lets you have your reaction up before that first round. And again, what stat you use to roll for initiative should be based on how are they engaging into this fight. So, for example, if your rogue is doing the exploration activity of lie to try and get an NPC to help you out, and the NPC calls them on that and then starts fighting, the rogue should probably be able to use their deception for initiative because, well, they just attempted to lie, therefore, deception for initiative. And there are examples where it's not as clean cut, but usually you can just go with whatever feels right in the moment, and it won't break anything because it's just a ruling that you make in the moment based on the circumstances of the game. But again, default perception if you don't know, you really don't go wrong with that. I have one more note on things that I like to do with exploration activities in my games. I like to have each character define a default exploration activity. So, usually in a party, you'll kind of figure out what character is best at doing what. So, you're going to have the rogue be on search duty, because they have the highest perception. Unless they're actually sneaking around, in which case they'd tell me, hey, I'm going to be avoiding notice here. And so, that way, we can kind of have that understanding of, in the default encounter, you are going to be searching for traps, for like this dungeon. However, in this time, you've overruled that by saying you're avoid noticing. And the game gives you the flexibility to then do things like that. So your wizard might say, well, by default, I'm going to be doing an investigate so I can make a recall knowledge as soon as combat starts. I'd say, cool, sounds good to me. Where then, as they're going back through the dungeon, going back to the resting spot, the wizard might say, actually, now I want to make my exploration activity detect magic, because I want to make sure we didn't miss any magic items. And I'd say, cool. But it skips a lot of the tedium of things like a champion with a shield saying, well, I'm defending. That's my exploration activity. You can just have that written down. That's just what's happening. And unless that player tells me otherwise, they're doing what I've written down. Because, well, the game needs to get moving eventually, and if what it takes for the game to get moving faster is for me to ask people what their characters are generally going to be doing ahead of time, having that written down, reading it off at the start of it and saying, is everybody cool with this? We can just get going right there, and we don't need to go through the long list of, okay, what was I good at again? Because you just have it written down, and it's completely clear, good to go. Yeah. That's my basic guide on exploration mode. Let me know if this actually helped you in the comments down below. And with that, I'm gonna sign off.